Today on Deeper Dives, I'm talking to Mackenzie Burnett, the founder of Ambrook, a not boring capital portfolio company. And actually, Mackenzie is somebody who wrote the very first founder's letter in Not Boring all the way back in 2022 when we first invested in the company. Now they're bringing their fundraising out of stealth, announcing that they've raised $29 million, including a $26.1 million Series A led by Thrive Capital and Dylan Field of Field Capital. Mackenzie is one of a kind and is building a business that she describes as American Dynamism meets the American dream, a grassroots form of American Dynamism that supports and gives leverage to the founders and small business owners who build the country from the bottom up. She's starting in agriculture, but I think the software can extend to all sorts of SMBs that are complex, where people run a bunch of different P&Ls. These are the businesses that drive the country, and Ambrook is helping to drive them. So without further ado, enjoy my conversation with Mackenzie Burnett. Mackenzie, welcome.
Hello. It's really good to see you.
Good to see you too. When we were emailing over the weekend, you said that you were flying back from Boise. What was going on in Boise?
That's right. We have a couple of customers out there, and I was also visiting a candidate that we're thinking about bringing onto the team. And so it was just nice to spend time with him and his family. But I was already out west. I'd been in Bozeman, right outside of Bozeman. Actually, I was in the other Manhattan, Montana.
I didn't know there was one.
There are actually several Manhattans across the United States. But yeah, I was spending some time in the other Manhattan as well.
What's Manhattan, Montana like?
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. This time of year in Montana, it's just everything's in bloom. So we were staying on a teammate's family ranch, and her dad has been kind of like a regenerative ranching guru, and just the entire 750 acres of just river, and you can see like the trout jumping at sunset, and you're just like, we're just driving these ATVs around and like jumping out, and there's just like fields of wildflowers. It's really hard to describe how beautiful it was. Yeah,
it's probably a good place to ask what it is that Ambrook does, because I don't talk to a lot of people who are doing recruiting and customer trips in Boise and Manhattan, Montana.
Yeah, so we build financial management software for farms, ranches, and increasing other family-run businesses across America. But that's accounting, it's payments, it's cash management, or neobanking, I think as folks in tech call it. But for our customers, it's really just about a better way to stay on top of day-to-day finances for these really complex, like inventory, asset and liability heavy, balance sheet heavy operations. And it just requires a level of depth and feature set that really you can only get out of usually much more expensive software. But these are small family-run businesses, and so we're kind of building for that intersection.
It's cool. So 3 years ago, it was a little over 3 years ago, you wrote the first founder's letter in Not Boring. The last time you said this, I guess in the intro to this one, you said the last one was about this is what we hope to do, and this one is about what we're actually doing and what we've done. So what have you done at Ambrook over the past 3 years? The growth has been amazing.
When I first wrote that, we were still building out the core product. We have since early last year, we launched it and have grown to over 2,500, so 2,500 operations are now using Ambrook. And just, I was reading back through, we were building out a lot of case studies recently. I was reading back through that for writing my letter. And it was just anywhere from like, we've helped, it's really meaningful, like helped, sons take over operations from their fathers. We've helped folks sort of double their book of business, cut their bookkeeping time by more than half. But I think more importantly, we've kind of helped increase clarity in sort of the here and now. And folks, our customers have really great stories about how it's just really increased their confidence in the future as well. And I think reducing anxiety. We even actually have a story of we have a couple on Ambrook who said that the conversations that they had with our support team convinced them to get married. So,
I've heard that a social product has done that before. I've never heard that before. How did that happen?
I think it's because when you work with especially a family-run business, but when you work so close to the finances, it's actually just so intimate and central to how relationships work within a family or within a business. And so we oftentimes are kind of at the heart, at the literal and proverbial kitchen table. We are at the heart of conversations about stresses and anxieties, but also hopes and dreams for the future. And I think that has been one of the most unexpected parts about building Ambrook, is just the type of stories that we get to be a part of.
You have kind of a wild background. I'd love to hear a little bit of your story just getting here, and then how you decided to start building, accounting and financial software for farms.
Yeah, I definitely have. I don't know. To me, it feels like there's a common, through line. But I think if someone looks at my background, it looks a lot more winding. And I think I've always been trying to pursue work that enables me to have the biggest impact that I can on the people and the issues that I really care about. And I grew up, and my whole family works for in public service. And so I grew up with this very strong through line of national pride and patriotism. But the way that it manifested was in, my family works for the a lot of my family members work for the Department of Agriculture. And so it was in these very policy wonky conversations, right? Conversations at the dinner table were about citrus canker. And my parents met the USDA. And so they were talking about their, lives kind of traveling through citrus fields. And I think that the feeling of doing the work for people who are in the field and not just in the abstract and software and offices, I've always been super interested in connecting those two. But I see the impact that software can have at the scale, right? You can extend your impact beyond just what one person can do. Yeah. And so I've always been interested in kind of pursuing the intersection of that. So a lot of my work over the past since I graduated has been in that, and Ambrook has been where I've tried to do that work for the past 5 years.
I guess maybe then, given your parents' background, the more interesting question is how you found software. When you realized that software was going to be the thing that would help you solve these problems at a greater scale.
Yeah, I actually have a really great story about that. Or I have a very distinct memory when I realized that, which was I had just come off of 2 back-to-back internships with the government. One of it was with the U.S. government, and the other one was I got a chance to intern for a UK member of parliament for a semester studying abroad. And both of those experiences kind of deflated me a bit. I mean, it was very cool. I was, it was really cool to be able to obviously get that exposure and do that work. But I had built up in my head this idea of working in government and public service and all the impact that I could have. And I just saw what the reality would have been for me coming out of school, looking at, my, peers plus a couple of years and just the work that they were doing. And it just wasn't nearly the scale of impact that I really wanted to have. And then my friend encouraged me to come by this space that he kind of described on campus as, a bunch of kids that had taken the storage closet and had taken out all of the broken furniture and stuff and filled it with couches from their apartments and a microwave they found on the street. And, I went, and it was, the idea of you could take an idea and build it that night, and you had a working software application on the internet the next morning. This was, a hacker group that was just hacking, all day. And it was so electric. I remember walking in and seeing everyone do that. And it was like a light bulb went off, and I had no background in tech, no background in software. And it really changed my trajectory in terms of what I thought was possible and what I ended up doing next.
That's wild. You talk about this idea that I love of American Dynamism meets the American Dream, or grassroots American Dynamism. What does that mean to you? Because I think when people hear American Dynamism, it is Anduril and going to, build the next defense prime. What does the grassroots version of that look like?
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this a lot, which is I have a ton of respect for the work that folks who are building, I would say, for these large scale, defense, sort of new defense industries are doing. Healthcare, especially top down, are doing. But I just kept on thinking about, especially working with customers, what does the grassroots version of that look like? And I think for me, it actually, you need both. You need the bottoms up swell and you need the top down. And, it's this idea that true optimism has to be rooted in real progress that people see in their day-to-day lives. And when you're more optimistic about something and you actually believe in the future, you will actually work harder, which means you get the opportunities, which means you actually get to the growth. It feeds on itself. And it has to be a groundswell that's matching the amount of capital that, is kind of pouring top down into a lot of these industries. And I also kind of think about it as dynamism itself is about resilience, right? It is a kind of, I keep on gesturing because I think of it really as like a fabric or something. It's like you have to strengthen each individual node and the relationship to each other in order for, the whole to be greater than the sum of its parts. And I've just thought about a lot about that. And I do think that it is really hard to build, it's hard to build a business that serves, it's hard to build any startup, but, to serve SMBs, you have to be really willing to like build the thing that can really help a lot of people. And then, it's, distribute it in a way that can be distributed at scale for relatively low cost. So you can keep the cost affordable basically for the people you serve. And so it is hard, but I think that is worth it if we do believe that American dynamism is worth going after. Yeah.
Yeah. There's Amazon, and then there's, the Shopify coming in and saying that they're going to arm the rebels. And this feels very much like the arm the rebels approach for them. It's, increase kind of total entrepreneurship, I guess would be the kind of goal for you. What does like ultimate victory look like here?
Yeah, totally. So I think for me, it's about building America where you can build businesses, you can be entrepreneurial, and you have many, many, many different options of how you want to do that. And I think the optionality is actually what, there's not just one way. It's not just take venture capital and that's sort of the way that you can build a business today. There are many options available to people because that the plurality is basically what you want. You want to have many, the American experiment is many different,
Yes.
many experiments actually. And so I think that is something that I think about. I also think about the idea of aligning kind of short-term incentives. So like get something off the ground, get cash flow, like make it year after year, with long-term incentives, which is build for a future that is both environmentally and economically resilient, right? Like I think that, increasingly, we have to build for a world where we are thinking about resilience in the long term.
Yep.
And there's a lot of macro factors right now, that are, you can kind of see where when you do have fragility or you have lack of optionality basically in the supply chain or something, a lot of things break down. And so I'm just really interested in understanding what does it take to actually stand up resilient domestic industries that can thrive and not have to compromise in a more globalized world.
How'd you choose, starting with accounting software and then adding out the financial suite, like how'd you choose that as the vector to go after this problem?
Yeah, I didn't actually start with accounting software, and I think this is hard. It's hard to go up against something like an Intuit or folks that have been building for a long time. And again, I'm big fan of it, just introducing more options in the market. But we actually started by trying to help producers. If you talk to a lot of farmers and ranchers, they'll often tell you that working capital or like ability to get more flexible working capital, it would help them with a lot of their issues that they're facing. I think that's true. So we actually started by helping folks access pandemic relief during COVID, just navigating a lot of government paperwork because I had some experience from that from my parents, and very quickly realized that we couldn't actually help people at scale if they didn't know their numbers or have good financial records. And it just everything just goes back to accounting. And so we just kept getting tugged back to this problem. And we're like, all right. And that's sort of when we was like, we're going to hunker down and build this for like 2-3 years and then pop back up,
I think we probably talked about this the first time that we met, but my sister was in the Peace Corps in Guinea and was working on economic development, and now started building accounting software for small businesses, and now has a lending product, but had to go back and like the first thing is getting them off of paper and into accounting software, and then you can lend to them, and then opportunity starts to happen. But it sounds like a very similar kind of story in a different place. Like you need to understand what the business is and what your business looks like before any of this other stuff can happen. Yeah,
totally. It's actually, I think everything is actually accounting at its core. It's accounting all the way down.
Yeah.
And if you look at a lot of software that exists, it's all building kind of around or pointing to, what is an accounting system, but just it's a system of record where you have the transactions or the journal entries, and then you are just tagging it with arbitrary bits of information. And if you kind of think about that level of simplicity, it's really, then the game is really just how do you make that as easy as possible for folks, and how do you increase the number of dimensions that you can tag that financial data on in a way that gets the context from people who have the context without requiring them to understand like complex accounting concepts in order to get the information out that they actually need to run their business.
Yeah. And it's 2025 and we're on a podcast. So I have to ask, how does AI help you do that?
It's so interesting because it's sometimes the biggest breakthroughs we've had with our customers and helping them leverage AI are these very quiet kind of boring ways. So the way that we kind of think about building it is, so I went to the University of Maryland, and they have a big, beautiful like central mall, big green mall, and but the mall itself is not, if you look at it from above, it looks crisscrossed with all these different sidewalks. And it's because they just let the students kind of build their own paths, and then they built the sidewalks based on where the students went. And we kind of think about building AI the same way, which is you want to watch what the workflows are that your customers are using over and over again. And then you want to build in AI to be helpful, right? To help them better do those workflows, or even help them do things that they otherwise wouldn't have even thought possible, right? Based on what they're trying to do. And so a good example of that is receipt management, which is our customers have to, for tax purposes, have to save all their receipts. And so we would hear these stories that they would take these shoe boxes of receipts to their accountants at the end of the year, and that would be their financial management, right? And so Ambrook, basically, we didn't build the AI version of that first. It sounds very, you can imagine how like AI can be applied to kind of solve that problem. We didn't build that at first. First, what we did was we just built the ability to attach a receipt to a transaction, and just saw how customers watched that. And customers would sit one by one and attach one receipt to every transaction, like really diligently, like more diligently than the employees at most startups.
Yeah, right. Which is not a high bar, but yes.
And so we were like, okay, like this is the type of stuff that you can build bulk like receipt management and categorization, because it's clearly something that people are willing to sit down and do one by one. And I think that's the thoughtful application of that is kind of how we think about AI at Ambrook.
Question, I guess, on a couple of dimensions, which is like, one, how did you realize there was an opportunity for this part of the market? And then two, in a bunch of your investor materials, you kind of have like, there's cheap accounting software, and then there's really, really expensive accounting software. Like, why is it possible to build in the middle? Like, why has nobody done that before? And to make the question more complicated, like how much of what you're building in the middle is for this particular group versus kind of something that you can extend to all sorts of different SMBs?
Yeah, totally. So really what we're building for, and agriculture is the first vertical that we're working in, and we've been working with them for 5 years. But farms are a really, really interesting prototype of a lot of different industries, because farms oftentimes, it's thin margin, and farmers are super entrepreneurial. And so they're constantly spinning up these side businesses, or like to farm itself, you have to have also a real estate management company, right? And maybe you're doing food, you're vertically integrating. So you're doing processing, you might be doing custom work, so that's services, right? You're doing like construction, contracting, that kind of stuff. And so our second customer, actually, we like onboarded them, and we're really excited about that. And then they came around, turned back the next week, and they're like, great, this is working great. Now can you onboard our other 4 entities? And by the way, none of them are farms. One is a trucking facility, and so it was just so interesting. Almost immediately we had to build for a lot of these different industries and make sure that our software worked for that. And so yes, we're our go-to-market is very much focused on like agriculture, and there are some ag specific features that we've built in that are really helpful. But really what we've realized is that farms are just the archetype of, I think, the new type of small business in America, which is increasingly complex, increasingly what we call multi-P&L. You have multiple different business lines. You're using Shopify, but you're also doing invoicing, and you're also like paying by cash, and you're all, you're doing the whole range. And I think the thing that sets apart a lot of these more industrial SMBs than I feel like maybe a software company is that it's also balance sheet heavy. And so you have to deal with a lot of inventory. So you have complex assets. You often have operating lines. You have complex liabilities. And actually the balance sheet heavy part is what most businesses have to move off of something like QuickBooks for and move on to something like a NetSuite or an SAP. You just get to the point basically where, it's just too much to handle. It's, SAP software wasn't really built for these balance sheet heavy businesses. And that's essentially what we're building, is we're building the workflows to enable that level of complexity.
I can't even imagine. I mean, like, startups will hire teams of consultants to come do those implementations. Totally. I can't imagine getting off the farm and going to have to set up NetSuite.
Totally. Like most farms are complex enough that they actually should be, either should have some sort of fractional CFO, or they should be running on something like an SAP or a NetSuite. But instead it's usually, not always, but oftentimes these mom and pop shops that are running on spreadsheets or something like a QuickBooks that was built for, and QuickBooks is great, but it's also not built for every operation.
I want to talk through kind of like the mechanics of two businesses at two different sides of the spectrum. One is yours, and then like one is just a typical family-owned farm. Like, what is, maybe let's start there. Like, in the simplest version, break down the business of a family-owned farm. What are they buying? What are they selling? What do their margins look like? All of that. Yeah,
totally. So I think a dairy would be a good example, because I think a dairy is, complex enough to kind of illustrate this. But so a dairy you can kind of think of as, usually when people think about dairies, they think about producing milk, right? But a dairy is actually a pretty complex multi-enterprise, usually multi-entity operation. People don't really think about that, but most of the acreage in a dairy is your growing feed. So hay or, something, and that's in itself an enterprise. And so by an enterprise is basically like, you can think of it as a P&L. So you're growing the hay, you might be selling that hay to someone, third parties. You might be buying more hay, right? And then you might be feeding some of that hay to, that you grew to your cattle. So you're selling off some of those calves, right? You're raising them, like what happens with old cows, right? They get turned into oftentimes like beef, like dairy beef. And so you have that also whole operation. And then you have the third enterprise, which is you actually produce milk. And so you're producing the milk, but also sometimes maybe you're selling wholesale to a co-op, but then you might also want to do value added products, like you're producing cheese or you're producing ice cream, right? And all of what I described is like, okay, so that now, Packy, like how would you calculate how much it costs you to produce a pound of milk?
Is there like gap for dairy or like?
No, it's all just like, it's all gap, it's like that is like it, but what the difference is between what you file for taxes and like what true FP&A or managerial accounting is. And that question of like, how much did it cost you to produce a pound of milk is managerial accounting. And that's essentially what we help our customers get to much, much easier without having to hire a CFO or only getting visibility into that if you pay someone a lot of money at the end of the year. We can get that level of visibility to our customers in real time.
That's so cool. And how many people would be running like the operation that you just described?
For dairy, it really depends, but it can oftentimes, we've seen it primarily with just, a husband and wife couple and a family. Yeah.
That's
maybe you have some staff to help out, but it is primarily on the core family unit.
And if you wanted to do ice cream, you would build out, like bring in an ice cream person, or might you do that?
Yeah, you actually, we actually have a customer that does, they actually do gelato because it's actually a little bit better unit economics, because you don't have to have as high of a cream. You can just use the milk itself. But yeah, they do it all themselves. They basically built out the facility and they produce a lot of it. And they have some like summer staff and some folks who help out. And so, but it is a lot of the work falls still on the family.
And what's like the typical margin for, that we'll stick with the dairy example?
Typical margins, I mean, you're seeing, it really depends on the years. That's also with these commodity crops, but you're looking at margins in ag that range from negative maybe some years to like maybe 5%. Yeah. It's not like, especially after like, that's even sometimes before you're paying yourself. Yeah.
And as you kind of build out the suite of products, and we talk about your business in a second, but like, is there opportunity to improve those margins? Is it improving kind of just like the cash flow? Like, how do you think about how you help them financially?
Our mission is to help our customers become more profitable and more resilient. And on the profitability side, that is, most of our features are built around trying to get folks to that sense of understanding their true cost of production. And so the in the best cases, for Ambrook, what we've heard from our customers is that they were finally, for the first time, they realized that their, for like a cow-calf operation, that the replacement heifer enterprise was actually quite profitable and they should double down on that. But that their hay enterprise was losing them more money than they realized because of like the cost of the equipment relative to how much it was actually, how much it was actually producing. And so they realized that they would either have to scale that up or decide to completely get rid of it. And I think those are the types of decisions that you really do need to have real-time visibility into in order to make those adjustments throughout the year, and rather than just see it at the end of every year if you're sort of doing it right.
That's so cool. And how much do you kind of try to flag things to people versus just giving them the numbers is enough? They just look at it and they're like, oh, that's very clear.
We try to meet people where they are. And so for some folks, all they want is tax prep, and that's great. That's a great use of accounting software to like get you confident in your your taxes. For a lot of our customers, it's a blend of some folks can actually just get to it themselves, and some folks leverage we have starting to support our customers more if they want to have quarterly business reviews or those types of stuff. Some of our customers are starting to work with our team to do that more, and so we just try to have packages that just help people like where they want to be in their business, because I think it is a lot of our philosophies meet people where they are, but give them the tools. And I think the thing about Ambrook that I have been really proud of is that it's not easy to build software that can range that level of what people want out of it. And so the idea of like you keep the simple, but you can make the complex possible. That's what we really try to aim for.
How do you do that?
A lot of it is believing that sometimes 10x differentiation is not just one crazy feature. It's solving 1,000 tiny paper cuts. Like sometimes it actually is just like go back to basics and be like, how can we just make this easier? How can we cut out an extra step? Like how can we do that? I think the other pieces are that I think what we actually got right in the beginning for Ambrook is that kind of that I mentioned, the multidimensional like data architecture. We actually just built that in from the beginning because we kind of had the very firm idea from the beginning that we wanted to enable this type of outcome. And so I think actually we made some correct architecture choices at the very beginning of Ambrook that have just paid dividends in terms of our ability to do that. I think the last piece is that I think we're in the era of like rebundling, kind of when like everything was bundled and everything was non-bundled. Now everything's bundled. I think the rise of fintech and these other primitives have really actually helped us build an all-in-one platform that folks can, where folks don't have to jump between multiple different software. Because oftentimes actually the issues in accounting is just like reconciling two different pieces of software or data flows. And so we, as much as possible, and that's what we're using a lot of our most recent raise to also accelerate is just bring more and more of these workflows either directly connected or preferably like in the platform in a way that cuts out a lot of the reconciliation or errors, that type of stuff.
I want to do the raise in like 1 second. First, like how does Ambrook as kind of like a business machine work? Where are you acquiring customers all the way down through? What do your margins look like and the whole business?
Yeah, totally. So we have a lot of different ways in which customers are hearing about us. It's anywhere from word of mouth. We have a lot of partners who we're starting to build, especially more recently, relationships with who are kind of spreading the word about Ambrook, especially because we also pair a lot of that with really strong financial literacy courses. And so it just helps. It's like a win-win. We have something called Ambrook Education that we do that through. It's really shocked me, but just memes, just people like just being able to be like funny and relaxed kind of like, and we actually have a lot of our customers who are starting to be creators on Facebook for us, which is I love every time I see one of our customers create a new video talking about Ambrook. It is just awesome. And just way better than anything I could have ever come up with. So yeah, it really just depends. Yeah.
And then, so they come in, are they paying SaaS? Is this interchange? Like, how do you make money? And
yeah, totally. So Ambrook, we make money in a couple of different ways. So we have a SaaS fee. So that's just a monthly or annual fee. And then we also make money through fintech. And so we have interchange from our card. We have deposit yield. We just started to make some money from invoicing as well. And that all is nice because it means that we can, because we work with a lot of customers who have pretty thin margins. And so being able to keep the SaaS fee affordable and then instead make money on in ways that we can actually give them a better rev share and make more money, because it's mostly about like we're in the flow that instead a third party vendor would be in. So it's kind of like that we try to build that win-win in terms of how we make money there.
And so now we can do the big reveal. You just raised and announced a massive Series A. Tell us about it.
Super exciting. So it was co-led by Thrive and Dylan Field from Field Ventures, and continued support from Homebrew, who led our seed round, and a number of other just really, really incredible supportive investors over the years. And it just, it's just really, I mean, it was something that I just always really wanted to work closely with folks that I feel as though got me and got what we were trying to build, and were willing to sit through what I think is a long build to build the right thing. You know, it is not an easy decision to build a whole new like ERP, but it's something that I'm just really excited about.
It's funny how the people who are willing to do that are also like the Thrives of the world, who also end up being the best. What's it been like working with Thrive so far?
Yeah, it's been really great. Josh is our partner, and I remember when Josh and I first met, I just got the sense that we actually mostly just talked about the future, and I remember when the phone call that I got where he offered to invest, what he said was that he wanted to back founders who were interested in not the next couple of years, but in the 20-year vision. And that was something that I had talked about with him, was that, you know, I want to be doing something like this for 20, 30 years and build something that lasts for a really long time. And that was, that ethos is very much, you know, in all the ups and downs of building a company since then. I've never questioned that is like where he's coming from. And that I think it, like, if you look at a lot of Thrive's investments, especially recently, is very much in that ethos.
And then Dylan Field seems like he's the hot new solo GP. He just was, like co-leading rounds with Founders Fund kind of coming in behind him. What's that been like? That's like kind of the other side of the spectrum in terms of scale, but he seems like he's doing a great job so far.
Totally. Dylan is great. Dylan is someone who I have a ton of respect for. Something I just noticed about him that I think is one of his superpowers, that he, in the same sentence, he's able to go from 40,000 feet to 5 feet, back up to 40,000 feet. He's just able to connect the strategic to the tactical and back in a way that has already been helpful for me and us, and how we think about a lot of things that we need to, how to think about and interpret macro conditions, and then connect that to like what we need to do now. Like, it's not a given that you are working with someone who's like that. And I think obviously his operator background is really helpful in that too.
I wanted to ask, do you think he's so good at this because he's been an operator, or do you think he's been a really successful operator with Figma because he's really good at this?
Oh, it's a good question. I think it's probably the latter. I definitely don't think it's a given. I know a lot of investors and operators who cannot bounce back and forth between the two.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine that they had to have been attracted by your growth. I don't know what you're allowed to say on camera about the kind of just revenue growth, but it's been pretty wild recently. What can you tell us about growth?
What I can say is that we've gone from, in January of last year, we had like $30K in pilot revenue. We were sitting in a beta for a long time, just working with a couple of dozen customers. And now we're working with, over 2,500 of those customers. And so, and that growth is we really only see it continue. And so that is, I think it's that a lot of that is driven sort of the investment.
If you know that you're going to be in it for 20 years and that's kind of the goal, is it easier to do those kind of first couple of years where you're still at 30,000, you're like building an ERP, you're doing this little thing, or is that like still really hard even if you plan to do it that way?
It's still really hard because it's just like, anyway, I feel so grateful for our team, like just, having the trust and also the excitement to continue through multiple years of staying quiet and building something with a small group of people to make sure that we got it right. I think that has been something that couldn't have done it without them. But yeah, it's definitely exciting to see a lot of proof points come now that we had really only ever hoped for, like I would say like 2 years ago.
There's two things that I think you do really well that I'm going to ask. Like it's where all this is leading is does that help recruit the team and then keep them motivated? And they're different. But one is really putting the mission kind of first and foremost and having a clear kind of distinctive mission and living that yourself. And the other is, I think of any company that I've invested in, the investor updates are like as strategy heavy and thoughtful and like this is what we're doing and why and here's where we're heading, like maybe more than anybody that I've seen. Do both of those contribute to being able to attract and then, retain people through periods like this? What do you think the balance or the split is between those two things in recruiting?
I think actually the best recruiting advice I ever got was someone who said that recruiting is like putting up a bat signal, and you're not going to be attracting everyone. But if you put up your bat signal in as many places as possible, and if you enable other people to put up that signal, then you will find the right people. And that's how you build a really distinctive culture and team. And so I think we both accidentally and sort of on purpose did that really early on, was we just put up the bat signal. We're like, this is who we are. This is what we care about. If you care about it too, come and find us, And so I think that that has actually been so helpful, is just actually being so specific about what we care about in our brand and our aesthetic, and really caring about that craft. I think that has actually attracted a lot of people who I feel very grateful to be on the team now.
And you said it's kind of a mix of people from traditional tech backgrounds and then just from kind of ag backgrounds. Is that two separate recruiting tracks? Like, how do they all end up working together in the end? Like, what's it like to build that team?
Actually, not at all. One of our new team members who came from Montana ranching family, she said that she actually read the piece, the founder's letter in Not Boring.
Your piece in Not Boring.
That's right. Like, but yes, like she read the founder's letter in Not Boring, and then watched the Stripe video, and she said, it feels like we want the same thing for different reasons, and that's a really good thing, and that's why I wanted to join. I was like, that made my week, You
just made my week. That's what we're doing this for.
Yeah.
And hopefully if you're listening right now, go work at Ambrook. Back on the strategy piece, you're in this really interesting spot now where you could expand into different kind of customer verticals. You can expand the product suite. You have enough money now to maybe do a little bit of both at the same time. How do you think through those decisions, and where are you probably going to go next?
First and foremost, we want to make sure we're doing right by our current customers. And so it's making sure that we're really deepening those workflows and making sure that is in the place that is up to our quality bar. And I think it's there's a couple of things that are like inventory management, for example, is a big one on our roadmap that we're building this year that will help with understanding cost of production, help with those balance sheet heavy workflows. So there are examples like that, but inventory management is also not ag specific. There are some things that we are doing that we are building in that if we weren't focused on ag, we might not build. But it is absolutely, we are keeping in mind the workflows that our current customers who also have processing facilities, right, also need. And so it's nice actually to be working with a customer base that actually is so diverse in their industries and needs, even if it's a lot of them are under this umbrella of ag, because it keeps us honest basically about what we need to build that will be able to serve the majority of those workflows. But I think the idea of product market fit is you want to build the least number of features for the most number of people, and so I think that's also a philosophy we have in mind. And
you mentioned already one business that has both the farm and then trucking, and I know a lot of the businesses work with a bunch of different vendors. I think the holy grail of doing payments or APAR is that you're touching a bunch of people who you can then go sell to. And that always sounds good on paper. And I've written about it in the context of other companies, wrote about Melio, which is a payments company and sold recently. And it's a massive opportunity, but it doesn't seem like anybody has really fully cracked that flywheel. What's the hard part about doing that?
Yeah, it's actually, it all goes back to accounting. It's accounting all the way down. It's actually what's missing is you still, even if you have a payments network that has been built, you still need to eventually get that back into the accounting software to reconcile and to sort of know all that. And so that is why we have seen customers who are super willing to switch from their payroll provider, from their payments, their invoicing software, from whatever. The thing that's hardest to get people to switch is from their accounting software. So that's that means that we have to, double-edged sword means that we have to be that much better to justify why people should switch to us. But once people do, and we have the embedded, we're also going to be launching payroll in the next couple of quarters. But like once we have all of those embedded payroll, payments, et cetera, deposits is another one, right? Like you are their system of record. You are much, much, much 10 times stickier than with payments. And so that's one piece. The second piece is that with true B2B payments, there still is actually a lot of risk because it's not on the same banking infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so there are still a lot of charges, basically transaction fees. With Ambrook, because everything is built on, a lot of our payments are powered out of the Ambrook wallet, which is the same banking core. You actually can do true instant and free payments that have high context. And so my invoice is your bill and it's instant and free. That has never been done before. But we're actually starting to see that happen on Ambrook's network. And so it's about, build the machine to get the distribution to start to make that work. And then you can kind of build from the network from there.
And if you have the accounting software, then like theoretically, and I'm sure this is like 100 times harder, in practice than it is me saying it, but like it also just makes doing your accounting easier to just be like, all right, fine, we'll do payroll with you. We'll do like X, Y, and Z. Even if you're good at integrating other stuff, it's just still a little bit easier to do it all with you and have it show up in the same place.
Yeah, totally. It's always a question between integration and doing it yourself. And so we are focused on what we think we can be best in class at, which are the financial workflows. But if someone wants to use a point of sale system or wants to use something more specialized, like we should be really good at integrating with that too. It's just that over time, it makes sense to do a lot of this natively. And it's just easier now. It's so much easier now to build software than it was even 2 years ago. Like the AI experiments that my team is doing right now are kind of mind blowing. Like you can basically take a linear ticket with a bug and basically just run an agent against it. And half the time it will just fix the bug or like build what we call small rock, build the tiny feature. And it's like that happened, for us, like that happened in the past couple of months. It's pretty wild.
I have been trying to get people to tell me like what the most amazing software built with AI. I'd almost expect with Cursor and whatever else out there that I'd be like every software that I use is just going to be getting a little bit better. And I haven't noticed that. Like, do you think it is maybe that you can get to feature parity more quickly, or you can do a bunch of this little stuff and then like over time it compounds into better software? And so I just need to be patient, or like as someone who's using kind of AI for coding and building your product and making it easier, how do you think that shows up?
Yeah, totally. It is about speed. And so it's about speed and about turnaround, I think, especially for customers or these tiny, like again, the winning by like mending 1,000 paper cuts, like that type of ethos. But the thing I've also thought about with AI and making software better is that sometimes I think we're a bit trapped, and like, yes, it is, what I mentioned is just amazing, being able to replace a lot of the work that otherwise we would have had to spend a lot of time doing. But I think it's sometimes a little bit too skeuomorphic. And I think some of the most interesting applications for AI will be non-skeuomorphic. It will be these things that humans could have never done. And that is something I'm thinking about a lot, especially with the payments network and the context basically of the payments network, is how can we actually better support our customers by looking at patterns of what's happening basically in the payments network that a human probably couldn't have detected. And how can we use that to strengthen supply chains and to help our customers build more resilience around what's coming, right? In a way that maybe if you were like a big hedge fund with a lot of money, you could be looking at the macro signals. But like if you're a farmer, in Kansas, that's not going to be necessarily the information you'd have access to. Like how can we help with that?
Skeuomorphic is not a term that I've heard a ton out of outside of crypto recently. Could you define skeuomorphic for the audience? I know Chris Dixon loves this one.
It's basically the Google Calendar is skeuomorphic because it looks exactly like the physical calendar. Yeah. Right. And so that's an example of sometimes skeuomorphism is really helpful because UX pattern that has a lot of familiarity. And I think the temptation has been to build AI that replaces human work one-to-one. And that's skeuomorphism, basically. And I think that's also helpful. I'm not saying that that is very helpful. But the harder thing to imagine is the non-skeuomorphic version of that.
My favorite example, I think, is the early iPhone, where like everything just like all the app icons looked exactly like that thing would look, and they had like the bookshelf that looked like a bookshelf.
Yeah.
I have not heard it applied to kind of human work, and it's like a really interesting reframing of this. Another one that's interesting that you wrote somewhere was you linked to an article about AI being an immersion technology. What does that mean? Because that's another one that I've not heard.
Yeah. So that was a really interesting article out of Noema. And the reason why I really liked that piece was it kind of inverted the narrative that I think that a lot of mainstream media has about AI is coming to take all of our jobs. And it instead talked about how it was, the potential for AI is to actually bring back, kind of democratize knowledge and skill sets back to the middle class in a way that, this article kind of goes on and talk about how actually the first computing revolution took that away. So you had like a calculator was a human, back in the day. Yep. And so what does it look like to actually have a technology that can enable more people to bridge skill set gaps that otherwise were trapped kind of in like very folks who essentially needed to have like a lot of knowledge or training basically to do work, a lot of certification, that type of stuff. Like, what does it mean when you can just do a lot of stuff without needing that certification? Like, I think it does actually start to flatten it back out. Who knows? I think this is, who knows how things will happen. But I just thought that was a really interesting piece. And it goes back to how we think about AI as like a helper, or as like a review mode, or as someone, it's the sidewalk that's built after like a human like crosses through the grass.
Are there other, because I love the Maryland kind of mall. It's such a good image of how this stuff works. Is there anything other that you guys do internally that's unique in how you build the product that maybe others don't?
I don't know how unique this is, but we try to spend a ton of time like on the ground with our customers. And oftentimes our customers will say it's the first time that a software company has ever visited them or their town, like who knows about their town, but like that they know of. And I think that's something where it's so important to the way that we build to enable everyone on the team, whether or not you come from a background in ag or not, or especially if you don't come from a background in ag, to understand the context, like to contextualize the work that they're doing. And I think that does end up actually building better software, because I think, I remember when I was in YC way back when, Winter 16.
I didn't know that you were in YC.
Yeah, it was my first company. Graduated college and then just like went into YC, which is like such a like
back
amazing
it was
introduction.
Cool. Yeah.
Introduction into Silicon Valley. But I remember hearing an anecdote about how, I think it was, maybe this is the wrong reference, but I think it was the Pinterest founder, but would go and like watch people use Pinterest like in person to get UX insights. And I've always like it was just because it was like I was 21. I was like, oh, this is how people build software. Like, I've always thought about that. You have to just go and watch people try to use the thing that you're like, look at the context in which they're in and try to use the thing that you've built. And I think that's something that maybe companies do really early on. And I just didn't want to lose that. Like, I wanted every single time that we built like a major new feature, or just every time a new person brings on the team, part of the company ethos is to go out to the field and watch people try to use Ambrook, because you learn so much more. You like learn about what their desk setup is and how they're using paperwork and how they're actually taking their pile of receipts and like using the app and whatever. You see the difficulties of the clicking. We use LogRocket, which is a way to proxy this, but it's just nothing like actually watching someone fumble with what you've built and be like, all right.
And it probably gives you like enough pain and embarrassment to like just really want to go out and solve that.
Exactly. Like, be in person with people. And I think that has been my biggest lesson, is that people almost always be surprised and delighted is not imposition. Like obviously be thoughtful about it, but people want you to show up and want to see the world in which they're in and want to be understood. And that, has been really cool.
You were saying before we started recording that you're on the road like a third to a quarter of the time. It's like a beautiful sentiment. And also now like my capitalist mind is wondering, have you tracked like word of mouth referrals from people that you visited in person versus not? Because I would imagine they have to like tell everybody.
Yeah, that's actually super interesting. We haven't, but I think that would be a really good test to see. I don't know if the CAC would still be quite worth it, but but it is something that like, it is just really important for us to be able to contextualize the work to understand what we're doing.
So we're wrapping up here, but what's the next like kind of 6 months? Who do you need to hire? What are the types of things that you're going to be like really focused on now that you have the capital in the bank and you get to get going? Yeah,
totally. So it's 3 things. It's like deepen the workflows so that we, in partnerships, that we can build, get to, like I mentioned, like closer and closer to making it really easy to get to true cost of production. It's architect. We're doing a lot of work to architect a lot of the AI layer, and then it's start to actually build out the payments network and bring it out of a beta that we've been piloting with a couple of our customers. And in order to build that team, I mean, we're hiring kind of across the board, anywhere from I'm building out a lot of my leadership team to engineers and folks who are going to be more in the field with our customers. And so, it is kind of like firing on all cylinders, which is really exciting phase to be in.
And where can people find these jobs?
Ambrook.com/careers.
Amazing. Last 2, what's in the past 3 years since you wrote the original founders letter, what's been the hardest thing that has surprised you?
I think it actually is the long build. It's kind of what we talked about before. But I think you can have a thesis and a vision, and you have people who like want to be in that, but then the day-to-day is you have to keep on going back to the reason why. And I think that's actually why growth is a tide that like lifts all boats. It is just so helpful to see an external impact of the work that you're doing and get that feedback loop immediately. And it just makes everyone feel better. Like it makes me feel better. It makes the team feel better. It's definitely not like, and you don't want to be growth at all costs, but like growth is helpful,
Yeah, the growth is helpful is a good one. And then last one is what's been unexpectedly good? Like what's just gotten you the most excited or happy over the past 3 years?
It's definitely like the little moments with the team and with customers. I mean, like last week when we were in the other Manhattan in Montana, we 2 of my team members just closed some of our biggest customers to date, and really excited and had signed a couple of those that day, and that was kind of, they beat the goal that they wanted to have, and all they wanted to do was go jump in the pond, and I joined them, and so it was the 3 of us basically like jumping this like freezing pond, and it was just like, it was, and just like went for a swim, and it was just that it is so precious to be able to do. It's like the moments in between that are just as important as the work that you do.
Beautiful way to end it. Beautiful company to be talking about going into 4th of July weekend. Mackenzie, thanks so much for doing this, and we'll do it again in 3 years.
Thanks, Becky.